Hi everyone, welcome back to some more Elden Ring lore. I am now going to be exploring the lore of the Hornsent. This is a colossal part of Elden Ring, and especially of the DLC, that I am really wanting to dive deeper in and have a greater understanding of. And so, once again, we are here with another incredible Vati video, which will be linked in the description if you would like to check it out. And yeah, you can just leave a like and subscribe if you enjoy, and sit back with me and let's learn about the Hornsent. Okay.
Before Elden Ring's DLC was released, a data miner leaked to me that there was to be a stage codenamed Babel somewhere in the realm of Shadow. Now, obviously Babel is a reference to the Tower of Babel from the Bible, and Anir Elim is clearly the tower in question.
I told you there's so much connections to the Bible.
Why did FromSoftware decide on this codename for the place? Genesis 11:4. Then they said, "Come, let us build ourselves a city, with a tower that reaches to the heavens, so that we may make a name for ourselves. Otherwise we will be scattered over the face of the whole earth."
Interesting.
This was the Tower of Babel, and the Babylonians that built it were prideful, a trait that tallies with the Hornsent, who believed they were a chosen people. So they too built a tower, a Anir Elim, a spiral that would pierce the heavens.
Cool.
But as it was in Genesis, the construction of such a tower would have dire consequences for their kind.
Ooh.
The Tower of Shadow houses a divine gateway. A well-kept secret it was, but the gateway was once the birthplace of a god. A god we know all too well.
Marika. Hell yeah. Chapter 1, Divine Invocation. I don't know if I'm saying that right. Invocation.
Horns are sublime artifacts to Hornsent, and their presence confirms the belief that they are a chosen people. And tangled horns in particular are viewed as these irrefutable symbols of their primacy. The word primacy in this case is meant to convey that the Hornsent considered themselves to be apex beings, the first and foremost, thanks to their horns. In one item description, we're told that horns growing upon the body is a phenomenon born partially of devolution. And yet, to the Hornsent, the appearance of horns was considered a signifier of the divine.
And I reckon that the truth is somewhere in between, just a mutation.
I think it comes down to the idea that the closer one gets to the moment of creation, which more often featured beings with horns and other aspects of the crucible, the closer one gets to divinity. If you believe that is that life was created in a divine act.
Cool.
In Elden Ring's divine creation myth, all life began as stardust, born of great rupture in the cosmos.
Yes.
You'll find differing opinions online regarding exactly how this breaks down, but as I understand it, all that there is came from the one great. Then the golden greater will of that one great fractured in what can only be described as a kind of Big Bang. And
Big
life
Bang.
and souls were thus created. While the greater will clearly still exists on some level, its fracture is what eventually led to the melting pot of life known as the Crucible.
And things like
the
chaos
most primordial form of life on the earth. So it is that in Ymir's words, we too are children of the greater will and its fracture. This interpretation of events handily explains why gold appears in the aspects of the Crucible. The Crucible ultimately came about from the golden greater will, and so gold infuses much of this primal life.
Right.
Feathers, scales, fangs, horns, these were evolutionary mutations that refined early life. Thus, there is something pure and divine about their occurrence, even if they are a byproduct of a more bygone, wild age.
Cool.
Thus, they are divine while also being aspects of devolution when they occur later.
Where they're scorned in one area and praised in another.
Purity of the wild was a man known only as Red Bear. And I want to talk about him because I think his lore might help us to understand the Hornsent concept of wild divinity a little better. Somehow, this man found himself in a life or death battle with a great red bear, a bout from which he emerged victorious. and afterwards he became fascinated
He
by the
admired the bear.
untainted glory of the bear's naked strength. For he was a Redmane, a faction led by Radahn, who was in turn also captivated by the raw strength of Lord Godfrey and his beast regent, Sarosh. Perhaps it was this that led to Red Bear's fascination with the untamed strength of the wild. And after his bout, Red Bear eventually forgot his own name. He wished instead to be a bear, no more and no less.
It's just a
There
bear.
are two great red
Good
bears
for him.
that we can fight in the DLC. One named Ralva and the other Rugalia. After defeating Ralva, you receive her pelt, which is just the thing to make a wild bear out of a warrior. And after defeating Rugalia, you learn an incantation that allows you to channel the bear's power in an act that is jokingly called the Bear Communion, due to this spell looking like a dragon communion
Yes,
spell.
very similar
and
visually
also
to the dragon
requiring the
communion.
subjugation of a wild beast. But is channeling the roar of Rugalia actually similar to communion with the dragons?
I don't know.
The act of dragon communion specifically requires the consumption and subjugation of a dragon's undying heart,
Right.
after which the warrior will be able to channel their power for a time. In the end, though, as we've learned from Bale, the dragon will quite inevitably overpower their
Overtake
devourer,
the
turning
mere
them
human
into a
vessel.
magma worm, or worse. Check out this video to learn more.
I did.
The reason I'm explaining this is because the roar of Rugalia, despite looking like dragon communion on the surface, actually has a line that reveals it's more akin to the divine invocation of the Hornsent than it is to dragon communion. So, what is divine invocation?
Hell yeah.
We'll go into this a little bit more in a moment,
Okay.
but basically, divine invocation is an art primarily used by the Hornsent.
These guys are
and
so hard.
it involves taming
Tough as
and
hell.
calling divine entities into oneself. In this way, you make contact with the divine.
Directly.
With both Dragon Communion
How cool.
and Divine Invocation, we have examples of beasts being subjugated, but I think there is a significant difference between the two. Simply put, I think the difference comes down to intent. Dragon Communion warriors subjugated the Drakes in pursuit of their strength,
Yeah.
but those who invoke the divine subjugate the wild in pursuit of the wildness within themselves. As the roar of Rugalia puts it, only through desperate battle with the feral wild can one discover a god unique to oneself. And in this way, I think we see aspects of the feral wild, like Rugalia, becoming one with the user afterwards, if that makes sense.
Does it
Luckily
change
for
the user?
Hornsent, they could invoke the divine via their horns, which have a spiritual connection to the crucible and thus a spiritual connection to wildness. But other humans, like Red Bear and the Tarnished, do manage to invoke it, but only by engaging in life or death battle with the wild instead.
Cool.
This brings
That
us to the
connects
Highland
their
warriors
connection to-
and to Horalu,
Ooh.
who I believe lived
divine.
side by side with the Hornsent. According to their leather crown, the Highland warriors are known to be hunters of bears. To them, there is no act more glorious than the subjugation of a savage beast. And among
Okay.
these warriors, there were some who wore the gloried attire, which included red patterned fabrics that were allowed only to those who hunted bears. These were the greatest and most glorious of the Highlanders. Interestingly, we also see a tassel of red hanging from the champion's pauldrons, which is armor from the base game that appears in a much later time that was similarly reserved for the Badlands' bravest. This armor would later be worn by the champions who followed Horalu into the Badlands, and I'd like to propose that this red tassel might be a callback to the red that was once worn by the Highlanders. Highlanders like Horalu.
Okay.
For there's
It
very
also
good
looks like
evidence to
hair.
suggest Horalu was also a Highlander. For one, the Highlander's axe is looted directly beneath a portrait of Godfrey, and it reads, "Brave combatants begin battle by crying out their names." Before the DLC, a piece of cut content revealed that the Highlanders were also called the Braves, and in line with that cut content, Horalu does cry out his name before our bout with him, signaling that he was one of these brave
Cool, that's part of his
Highlanders.
tradition.
What's more, the Highland axe enhances roars, and Horaloo actually roars with bear SFX during his battle, suggesting that he too wrestled bears with the best of them, and might have even achieved a level of divine invocation.
Yeah.
And as if this wasn't enough evidence, the warrior on the axe talisman wears the leather crown of a Highlander, and the axes of the Highlanders are also the signature weapon of Godfrey, who was Horaloo. So, Horaloo was a Highlander, and he had a clan, not unlike the Hornsent in this early age. And considering Godfrey went on to have 16 elite Crucible knights follow him, we can infer that he really did carry a lot of influence in this more wild, Crucible-adjacent age.
Cool.
I believe that for some near Stormvale, this was also an age of wild winds. From the divine beast dancing lion descriptions, we've learned that whirling storms are an aspect of the heavens, and from one of Horaloo's own descendants, we can infer that the power of the winds was an aspect passed down through Horaloo's bloodline to Nefeliloo.
I will call upon the storm to
Nefeliloo's
drive away the foulness that has settled on the winds.
And long ago, something called the True Storm raged.
I didn't even think of that. I forgot her surname.
Stormvale, which, incidentally, is also the place that Nefeliloo later lays claim to.
She's got the red.
This perhaps suggests that she has a sort of birthright to the place via Horaloo's lineage.
Yeah.
Here, long ago, the Stormhawks faithfully rendered lifelong service to the old king of Stormvale, who was the Stormhawk King, a hawk revered by all others as sovereign, back in the days when Stormvale's winds raged like no other.
Cool.
But while this ancient monarch is proud and refuses to answer any of our summons, its ashes still have a use, as they can be given to Nefeli, reminding her of a time long ago.
Wow.
Is that ash? I can smell the ancient storm in it. My thanks. I'll gladly take it. I'm not like Broderica. I don't feel the presence of spirits, let alone see them. Still, this ash, it reminds me of my first hawk. Thank you.
That's so cool.
It's very noteworthy that Nefeli had her own hawk. I think it reveals that there was a measure of human companionship with the hawks back then. And more than that, I think it could help us to equate divine invocation of beasts with a sort of mutual respect with those subjugated, which makes it markedly different from Dragon Communion, indeed.
Yeah, it's not a subjugation, it's a collaboration.
Nefeli achieved divine invocation. One man clearly did with a hawk. This was a Hornsent named Ornus.
Whoa.
Specifically, it says that he
tamed
the divine bird and made its wings his own as he soared through the sky.
So like merged with it.
I just mentioned the importance of discovering a god unique to oneself in divine invocation. Thus, I think it's significant that Ornus made the divine bird's wings his own. He tamed the divine bird, yes, but this was also his power for a time, anyway. Then he finally fell to earth and lived on as the guardian deity of the temple quarter.
Wow.
Saying Ornus lived on is certainly putting a positive spin on him falling to earth and dying, for it's here, on a hidden precipice overlooking the temple town ruins, that we find Ornus enshrined. But what Ornus achieved was quite the miracle. This is because, according to the Divine Bird warrior armor, the golden-hued divine birds are known to be cruel, never taking to human companionship.
So the fact that he
Those who
tamed
invoked
them
their divinity were few
them.
and far between.
Wow.
The mere mention that golden-hued divine birds never took to human companionship seems to suggest to me that there were other birds that did take to human companionship.
Yes, but not the golden-hued ones. Okay.
I think it's more likely that
so
she literally tamed
impressive.
a physical hawk who fought alongside her. But the golden-hued divine birds were in a class of their own, and might not have even existed in the physical realm. Nonetheless, Ornus
were like an
managed to
untamable
invoke the
spirit
divinity
as
of
opposed
such
to a
being,
physical
and
bird.
in doing so, he paved the way for many Hornsent to come. For the divine bird warriors were the very first of all horned warriors, and all horned warriors were descended from Ornus. To invoke
Horned
divinity
warriors
as
were
Ornus did,
descendants from
the Horned
Ornus.
warriors would utilize tangled horns as a medium, thanks to their connection with the Crucible. With the Horned warrior's greatsword, for instance, one can call a storm into the ornamental tangled horns, and then mow through enemies with that wind.
Yeah.
This was called horn calling, and it was apparently the first step towards divine invocation.
Oh, so this
Among the
happened
Horned
before
warriors, some
things
were
like
chosen
the
to become
wild
celebrated
bear
divine beast
calling.
warriors, and these are the ones in-game adorned with a lion's pelt and the divine beast helm. Given their namesake, I suppose these were warriors who had managed to call a leonine beast into themselves. And among these, those who truly excelled at divine invocation were granted another rank, becoming sculpted keepers, who would be granted
so
the
he was
honor
like a level
of the lion
above.
dance. Presumably, these are the two Hornsent within who are possessed to pilot the construction.
Yeah. Oh, that's so cool and creepy.
Beast from higher sphere delivered. Take root inside the tower's sculpted keepers. And perched within, we beg of thee, rise. Dance and kavod, cleanse all that thou wilt. Cruelty, woe, and those who plague the tower.
Damn.
Cleanse away the strumpet's vile progeny.
Such a cool moment. And then does a roar for the
word
wild.
sculpted here is curious. I assume it's a reference to the stone
wildness.
body of the boss we fight, which is akin to a sculpture from the way it grinds when it moves. As we've learned in the last video, stone was a fitting vessel for the spirit in ancient times, so that's what seems to be occurring here, with a so-called horn-decked beast being called into the sculpted keepers that are one with the vessel, possessed to channel this wrath delivered from a higher sphere.
Yeah.
And make no mistake, the sacred beast from beyond, whatever it is wrathful, with a rage that mirrors the storm said to be in the heavens. During festivals at the tower, this is what they would watch, even should it take Hornsent lives. A crazed, cavorting lion dance that represented wildness.
Yeah, so
and
they
freedom.
celebrated that because
I
it represented
see
the
thy
wildness.
purpose now. Wax wroth to thy heart's content, wild and free. And then, in exchange for this woman's life, release the sculptor keeper from thy rage. I ask thee at
I wonder
my
if it was-
last, oh sacred beast.
If it was an honor to be
Here,
sacrificed
in
to
the
this
current
beast.
age, in the distant future relative to all of the other events we've been discussing, defeating the dancing lion rewards you with the divine beast head, which, like the other horned headpieces, causes the blessing of the Erd Tree to become nauseating, reducing the restorative effect of the flask of sacred tears. Now, this is just speculation, but I reason that this effect occurs because, to the Hornsent, the Erd Tree would come to represent the polar opposite of their wildness. It came to
It's
represent order. And there is a talisman that I think suggests Lord Godfrey, who was Horalu, also found the sap of the Erd Tree nauseating. Yet,
Wow.
being the Giga Chad that we know he is, he simply poised through it. The
So
talisman
then-
depicts Godfrey receiving the Erd Tree sap, and as if the act of receiving it was difficult, the talisman reads, "The Lord accepted the sap stoically, without any sign of wavering. No wonder Lord of the Erd Tree casts a long shadow over the lands."
So would that
We
mean that the
previously
Hornsent are
established
more
that
susceptible to frenzied
Horalu
flame?
was present
Because they
in the
don't
early
like order
times
and they
of the
like
Hornsent
chaos?
as a Highlander, and that his wrestling bears can be considered akin to channeling divinity on
Yeah.
some level. But I reckon his connection to the Hornsent is much more direct than most people think, and that's because of the horned warrior armor. This armor features ochre fabric, draped over a chest piece, and it was made to resemble the unclothed form of a hero from older times. Without a doubt, I think, this unclothed hero was Horaloo, the
He did like
brave
to be
warrior
naked
who
from the
famously
waist
shunned
up.
excess adornment. I'm not saying that Horaloo was Hornsent. I mean, I guess we can't rule that out, since you don't exactly need horns to be Hornsent. Rather, a Hornsent is one because they practice Hornsent customs.
I
But I
see.
just don't think there's much evidence of Horaloo practicing these
Yeah.
customs. The Highlanders seem to me to be a similar clan, one adjacent to the Hornsent, wrestling bears and engaging with the wild.
It's like their
in a way
religion
that
is
also
just
brought them close
similar.
to achieving divine invocation.
Yeah.
But they didn't have the horns to pull it off.
So
Hornsent
found another
generally
way
don't
through
like other
wildness.
cultures. That's something we can infer from the Inquisitors that just took out other threats to their religion from within. But because of the proximity between the Hornsent and the Highlander clan, theirs was clearly a clan that the Hornsent respected, I think, to the point where they would one day dress their best warriors in ochre fabrics that were honorific of that Highland hero.
So
So
then
when
how...
Horaloo became Elden Lord Godfrey,
There's so many
as
Hornsent that
Marika
are
ascended to
obsessed
godhood,
with the Order.
it's logical to think that the Hornsent might have initially approved of this union.
They also
since
love that wildness.
Horaloo had been their hero. There is solid evidence that the Hornsent were aligned with Marika's rise as a god for a good while, so a lord alongside her leading 16 crucible knights and a golden beast on his back that echoes divine invocation should have been a
And
good
wildness.
omen for the Hornsent clan,
Okay.
right? Wrong. Horaloo was a Highlander who valued strength above all else. He believed a crown was warranted with strength alone, and it seems he saw power in the order of the Elden Ring and accepted it, even if it went against everything that he
Wow.
represented. So, later, as the Erd Tree's order became ever more distinct from chaos, Godfrey received the sap of the Erd Tree and, in doing so, should have shown signs of wavering, but he did not. He would not waver, as he neglected the horns growing on his omen children, nor would he waver as he pit his strength against the Stormlord. He and Marika had usurped the Hornsent's spiraling path to divinity, and their gate would eventually be closed.
Because he felt
No
owed
wonder
it due to
Lord
his
of the Erd
strength.
Tree casts a long shadow over the lands.
Interesting. Chapter 2, The Land of the Tower. So this must be before it's
At the top
separated.
of Anir Elim is a divine gateway, and it's with this that Marika ascended to godhood. But how? A scroll found in the Hornsent archives tells us a little bit about the rite that was involved. It reads, "A lord will usher in a god's return, and the lord's soul will require a vessel." So in the case of Marika, I guess one could argue that Sarosh was the lord, occupying the vessel that was Horaloo in order to usher in Marika's return. Alternatively, you could argue that this
Cool.
rite
Yeah, 'cause it did
only
look
applies
visually
to
just like that.
Nicola's ascent, and that it didn't apply to Marika's, but maybe I should save this discussion for a different video.
Okay.
Instead, let me establish here the nature of the tower itself, and how a divine gateway can even exist. Let's begin with a different line from the Secret Rite scroll, one that specifies that it's made of white tree bark. Many white trees can be found in and around Ballarat, and they are venerated by the Hornsent for good reason.
Okay.
The most important aspect of these trees is that they grow and intertwine in a spiral,
tangle.
which is this symbol of supreme importance in the world of Elden Ring,
Yep.
and of supreme importance to the
Yeah, they
Hornsent,
twist 'em.
especially who understand the spiral's significance.
Mm.
Incidentally, the Hornsent even appreciate two-headed turtles and their intertwined necks for this reason.
Damn.
The priests of the tower cast spiral incantations, and the last line of Spira tells us that the spiral is a normalized crucible current that, one day, will form a column that stretches to the gods. What this is saying, I think, is that
The higher the spiral,
is not just
the
a
closer to
symbol
God.
of the crucible, it kind of is the crucible. The spiral is a normalized crucible current, or put another way, it is this stabilized aspect that emerges from the Crucible's chaos. This line almost sounds as if it's written from the perspective of the Hornsent, and indeed, we know from the fine Crucible Feather Talisman as well that they did have a word for the Crucible as a tangible thing. The fact that they understood what it was helps to explain why they went so far as to build this enormous spiraling tower.
All things spiraling
they did
and
it
twisted.
because the spiral is such a potent symbol for the Crucible. Earlier, we talked about how the Crucible is tied to evolution, and how the spiral is the same shape as DNA, which is crucial to the process of mutation and evolution. A spiral is also made up of two entwined threads, which could explain why so much life in Elden Ring has this duality to it.
Radagon and Marika.
But how can a spiral form a column that stretches to the gods?
I guess why they
first, let's
feel
ask,
there needs to
what
be
gods?
a lord and a vessel.
The real answer is that we don't know for sure, but personally, I'm starting to suspect that the outer gods of the lands between are related to the Crucible. For one, both the Rot God and the Formless Mother are called twisted deities in the lore, which I feel is a play on words for the spiral, and it makes more sense to me that the outer gods might be these grounded, natural entities of the world. Rot, blood, death, the sun, these are natural concepts tied to the outer gods we know, and I find that easier to believe than the outer gods being these eldritch, cosmic beings. Although
so they're more just
they could certainly
elements
be both.
of life.
Whatever the gods were, the Hornsent would reach for the heavens through
elements
their
of
divine
things that
tower,
exist.
and I mean that quite literally. Look at the symbol for spiral incantations, and at the top you'll note two human hands grasping for new heights, surrounded by the spiral. This is called a spiral tree design, and if you look at the bottom, you'll actually notice leaves growing at the base. It's a symbol that's been printed upon amber, which is sap from a tree. And I think the way this description equates the White Tower with a spiral tree proves that the White Tower was built in the image of the white spiral trees of the land.
Yeah.
Anir Elim was the Hornsent's man-made spiral tree. Spiral
to get as close as I could to the heavens.
Trees in general appear to be special to the Hornsent, and I think what follows is a very relevant topic as it relates to Marika's Ode Tree. So these are the golden trees of Anir Elim. They do not spiral, but they very clearly are spiritual objects.
They still
with
twist.
what look to be feminine figures growing out of their bark.
Oh.
It's almost like the trees
I never
have
noticed
a
that.
remembrance of these folk. To understand why these bodies appear, let's look at the Euporia, a twin blade that symbolizes abundance, which was a secret treasure of the tower. Though the blades, fashioned from golden shoots, are largely wilted and darkened, their luster can be restored by dealing damage to foes. So here we have a weapon made from golden tree shoots, which grows stronger as it absorbs the life force of others.
Right.
Perhaps this is what clued the Hornsent in to how to cultivate their abundant golden trees as well. It's
feeding
the
it life?
idea that life can be recycled to create abundance,
Okay.
which is obviously an idea Marika took to heart as well. So to come full circle, let's consider what
So these
is
were prior
fertilizing
to the Ode
trees.
Tree.
I don't think this is sand. I think it's ash. Ash from cremated humans.
Damn.
We know for a fact
That's
that the
messed up.
Hornsent valued the ash of those who came before, infused as it is with potent spirituality.
Right.
We collect this revered spirit ash in townships and villages as it quietly accumulates in the palms of the withered corpses known as tutelary deities. The tutelary deities are spread evenly around areas of Hornsent occupation, and they were guardians, spiritual protectors of the land that were closer to divinity thanks to their tangled horns.
Oh,
In
so why were so
order
many of
to
them chopped
ascend
off at the neck?
from their mortal flesh to this state, it seems they would heighten their spirituality through severe ascetic training. And asceticism is basically when you forego indulgences of any
Oh,
kind,
so it's very much like
typically
those
in
monks who
favor
would
of prayer
try
and
to reach
fasting.
nirvana by
This evokes the imagery of
meditating
real life
for far too
Buddhist
long.
ascetics who have famously perished in prayer,
yeah.
which is a reference we also see in Sekiro with the monks of Senpo Temple,
Cool.
and in Demon
Yeah,
Souls
it's a thing
with
where-
the Monumentals, who are themselves similar to these folk that appear at the entrance to Ballarat and by the Sealing Tree.
They
As for the
meditate to
spirit
their
ash
death.
these deities accumulate in their palms, well, it seems to come from beyond somehow. I can't find any
Okay.
direct evidence of local furnaces where Hornsent would have cremated their dead to create all of the ash in Ani Elim, but we do know that cremation was certainly practiced in this age. According to Ghost Flame sorceries, in the time when there was no Erd Tree, death was burned in Ghost Flame, and the Deathbirds were the keepers of that fire.
Right, so
Upper
that was
Ballarat
a
is bristling
form
with
of
grave
their...
birds who were kindred to the Deathbirds, so there's clearly a
cremation.
Hornsent connection to cremation here.
Right,
Not to
so
mention
that
they have
flame
a talisman that
cremated
boosts
them.
the power of spirit ashes.
Ooh,
Also,
cool.
Ani Elim has statues of boats that are ferrying the dead.
I was
And there's
wondering,
many
is this meant to be
examples of the dead
Highlander
being sent upon the river
stuff?
in Elden Ring, only to wash up on the shores of Charo's hidden grave, where the tainted flesh of the floating stone coffins was similarly burned by the Deathbirds. So, to conclude, I do think there's good
Yes, so
reason
that's
to
their
believe
role.
that the Hornsent fertilized the trees of Ani Elim
With
with ash,
death.
even if it was done for no other reason than to enhance the spirituality
Damn.
of the place. But there's
Wouldn't
a
put it past them.
location where such potent burial practices were not observed, and here the consequences of such neglect is clear to see. At the Ailing village, a crude platform has been built at the precipice, and it's from here that bodies must have been thrown, for we find a mountain of corpses down below, piling at the mouth of the Elak River.
Damn.
Here, some have survived the fall, metamorphosing into flymen, thanks to the dreaded fly sickness that certainly is what had them hurled from above in the first place. The ailment talisman, looted at the platform, tells us more. A talisman depicting a soul taken by sickness. When the weak were infected with the dreaded fly sickness, they perished well before the metamorphosis could take hold.
So that was the
Oddly,
goal.
those who cared for the infected and made certain that they were given a proper burial were never afflicted themselves.
Oh.
So, in accordance with the effect of the talisman, which boosts resistances to the ailment that you are in proximity of, those who nursed the infected and gave them a proper burial did not contract the contagion,
Right.
despite being in such physical contact with it.
Because they were doing
These
the right
surviving
thing.
folk are the healers of the Flymen villages, and they are indeed capable of casting spells that heal the Flymen.
Right.
They're also capable of boosting the Flymen's damage.
Are they
and
also
casting
capable of
swarms of flies,
infecting
which,
others?
to me, suggests a deeper allegiance to this caste of people. I've seen theories that these
Cool.
healers are the ones that caused the fly sickness.
Oh,
But
in the first place.
considering they're actually capable of healing the flymen, I don't personally subscribe to that theory. Instead, I think this is a sickness stemming from the Japanese concept of kegare, which means
Kegare.
uncleanliness or defilement, which is what occurred when the sick were hurled into the river instead of
Infected
following
the
the
water
more
and-
typical and more hygienic cremation for the afflicted. The real curiosity to me is what entity is boosting the resistance of these healers who took care of the sick? Did the Mother of Truth protect them, since the healers do appear to use her magics? Or did the Outer God of Death favor them, since she is mother to the Deathbirds and their quote-unquote correct burial practices? It could even
So
be
if
the
they're
Rock God
partaking in
that
correct
protects
burial
these healers,
practices.
since manfly flesh grows mold, and rot was a theme of the manflies in Dark Souls 3 as well. We just don't know. As for why
Interesting.
these corpses weren't burned, well, fire was notably prohibited in Marika's Age of the Erd Tree, so I wonder
right.
if that might have prevented the
The
Hornsent
cremation.
from following a cultural practice of cremation. Marika did feed the Erd Tree's roots with corpses, but she notably did not cremate those corpses.
Yeah,
beforehand.
unlike
That
the
was a
Hornsent,
privilege that was saved
wasn't
for
the
those
ash
who earned the
that she
hero's
buried.
honor of Erd Tree burial, and it was these men and women who returned to the Erd Tree as spirit ash. perhaps ash is just the superior fertilizer. It's certainly
Then
less
why wouldn't she
confronting than corpses
them
being
just
kept
'cause
at
of
the base of a tree,
preventing
which
fire?
might explain why the corpses that feed the Erd tree were kept underground in catacombs or interred in jars.
Damn.
And speaking of jars, a common
Which she should
misconception
be
that I've
against.
seen in my comments is that these jars at the minor Erd trees are the same as the ones the Hornsent kept in their jails. But they're not. Erd tree jars are for the bodies of the dead. For the bodies of fallen warriors, ideally, if Alexander's predilections are anything to go by.
Okay.
But Hornsent jars, on the other hand, were specifically for the interment of the living.
Yeah.
And the shaman women within, they were the glue that held it all together. Literally. Let's talk about these shaman women. So, the
So they
word
could be
shaman
dead
is potentially
once.
overused in the English translation of Elden Ring, owing, I think, to a lack of synonymous words that could help differentiate the many different kinds of shaman in this game's lore,
So it's different
which
kinds.
is something that the Japanese translation does achieve. It does differentiate between all these shaman quite well. For example, the Saishi shaman of Shifra River are very different from the blind Itako shaman that hail from the same village as Marika.
Right,
And
okay.
even these blind shaman are different again from the Kitoshi shaman mentioned in the Great Jar item
Ooh.
description, which seems to refer to a third kind of shamanistic prayer expert
What are they
who
like?
wear jars on their heads. These are distinct from the blind shaman of Marika interred in the very same jails, and in the English translation, they're just all called shaman, which is a bit confusing,
Right.
to say the least. But it's the Itako shaman that hail from Marika's village that are relevant here in this video.
They're the ones that were
In
subjugated
Japanese,
to being
Itako
inside
or
the...
Ichiko are blind women who have trained to become spiritual mediums in Japan. Through severe ascetic training, the woman is afterwards said to be able to communicate with the dead. And it's noteworthy that all these Itako are all women in real life as well. This feminine aspect to the shaman from Marika's village aligns with another description in the base game that describes the Newman that shared a race with Marika as being all women as well, suggesting perhaps that women were of special standing.
And were they
in
able to
this
reproduce
shaman
with
culture.
themselves?
Incidentally, this might also explain why there appear to only be
Feminine,
women
yeah.
emerging from the trees of Anir Elim. Perhaps these
They
trees
use
were
the
only
shaman.
fed with the ashes of the shaman that
Yeah.
were kept in jars, not unlike how the minor Erd trees would be fed with the bodies from jars. Though
Right.
that's just speculation.
Okay, but
And
those
the
jars are
shaman were
separate. They've
fated
only
for
got
the
dead
jar.
bodies
I
in.
actually think the symbol on their head is a brand, something marking the shaman as a ritual object for the
Damn,
Hornsent.
that's so
According to a
messed up.
Hornsent phantom at the whipping hut, that was their purpose. They were to be whipped until their flesh opened and ripened, and then stuffed in pots with other folk, so that they could all meld together. The flesh of shamans was said
Hate.
to meld harmoniously with others. And
Great.
according to the arrogant
So
Hornsent,
vile.
life they were accorded for this alone. This Hornsent phantom claims that nigh sainthood awaits the shaman within the jar.
Yeah, they
And
think it's like an
while
honor
it
for
is
them
a
to be able
horrific
to...
fate, they're kind of not wrong that there was something divine going on here. Their ritual
Was
was
there?
working for a reason. Earlier, we discussed how the crucible was a melting pot of life, and no
Right.
item sums this up better than the talisman of all crucibles, aka the mother of all crucibles, which is a giant mass of intermingling crucible attributes. In a similar way
Feathers
to this
and horns
talisman,
and
the jarred shaman
tails.
also become a giant mass of intermingling life. And I think this explains why the Hornsent would have so valued the malleable, meldable flesh of the shamans.
Yeah.
For they could merge with others so effectively. As for whether the physical merging of life is divine, well, we kind of have proof that it is. The spiraling white tower itself has masses of bodies hanging off it, and it culminates in a divine gateway that literally is a giant conglomeration of flesh. And most importantly,
They're like
this
fossilized
approach has
bodies.
worked, evoking the crucible in this way has formed a functioning connection with heaven, or
How and
the
why?
Hornsent idea of heaven, at least. By the way, the shaman weren't the only thing in the jars. The jars also had Hornsent within them.
Yeah,
and
so that they could
these
have
Hornsent
the...
probably weren't the most important members of society. In fact, we have evidence to believe that the Hornsent chosen to merge with the shaman
Sheesh.
were sinners. There's a phantom in a jail here that begs for mercy, saying that they'll never do it again, and swearing that they'll be a living saint. Just
Yeah.
please don't turn them into a jarred one for their crimes. As for what they did
That's
with
so
the jarred
effed
shaman
up.
that was melded together with others, well, it's kind of hard to say for sure. Did they use this flesh to build the divine gate? Did they use this flesh to fertilize the golden trees? Or did they hope that one shaman, one day, would actually achieve true sainthood? Was this the ritual that led to the
Were they
rise
trying
of
to
Marika
combine more and more and more
Radigan?
into bigger jars?
Whatever the case, Marika would have her vengeance. Thus do we finally return to the end of the Genesis story about the people who built the Tower of Babel. Genesis 11:6-8. The Lord said, "If as one people, speaking the same language, they have begun to do this, then nothing they plan to do will be impossible for them. Come, let us go down and confuse their language, so that they will not understand each other." So the Lord scattered them from there all over the earth, and they stopped building the city.
Huh.
Verse 6 in particular has some parallels with Marika. After she had risen as a god, she recognized that the tower might potentially raise another divinity that could become a threat to her.
Right, so
And
if that was their
she eventually
intention,
set about shrouding the tower
to
and
prevent it from
scattering
reaching,
the Hornsent.
I guess,
In the Bible,
a greater
the Lord
will.
does this by confusing the language of the Babylonians, and I feel like this obfuscation of language might also be paralleled in the DLC with the Secret Rite Scroll and its fidgety little letters, as Freya calls them. The Sacred Rite of the Tower has become
They were
difficult
trying
to
to
decipher
learn.
in recent years, adding an extra layer of difficulty for those who wish to access
I
this
see.
horrific gate of divinity for their own ends. And you'd think that the Hornsent might have foreseen that this process might raise a vengeful god or vengeful saints, but I suppose
Not if
that
they
was
thought
their
they were doing
sheer
the
arrogance
righteous,
on display.
good
wasn't
thing.
it? Their stance was that the shaman should be thankful
Yeah.
for their nigh sainthood within the jar.
That's what I'm saying. They
And
believed they were
if
doing
a Hornsent potentate
great thing.
should feel doubt or impurity while stuffing pots with all manner of things, well, there were ritual implements
Yeah.
they could wear to
Just
ward
ignore
away
it.
such emotions so that their divine
Don't
ritual
doubt it.
could proceed.
Yeah.
And if vengeful spirits did emerge from this process, well, that's nothing new for the Hornsent. These could simply be twisted to their purposes as well. The bone bow, for example, is a product of the ancient hexing arts of the tower, and it imbues its arrows with vengeful spirits that naturally seek out living targets. The horned bairn, too,
Damn.
makes use of the vengeful spirits. Spirits of the young who died bearing overly tangled horns, who are memorialized by these fetishes. It seems
That's
the
so
Hornsent
weird.
learned a lot
They could have
from
too
the
many
death
horns
birds
to
and
live.
their hexes. On the flip side,
Damn.
guardian spirits were utilized as well as vengeful ones, and these guardian spirits watched over the caster that they were endeared to, protecting them from harm. This is a spell cast by the Hornsent Grandam, who,
Right.
with her tangled
The grandma.
horns, appears to have once been an accomplished, very high-ranking member of Hornsent society. Indeed, she has dialogue where she shows this authority she has over others.
None of the tower would dare interfere. And if one should, I'll see to them myself.
At release, this character was called the Empyrean Grandam, but this was quickly
Empyrean?
patched, making it clear that the word Empyrean was an inappropriate title for the
Okay.
Grandam, as far as the lore was concerned. But why was it changed? So, the word Empyrean in Elden Ring typically refers to those chosen by the Two Fingers as
Yeah.
candidates to become the vessel for the Elden Ring, even if that means succeeding Queen Marika as a god. Thus, the title Empyrean Grandam was commonly interpreted as meaning the Grandam was an Empyrean candidate for godhood. But I don't think that can be true. For one, the two fingers barely show up in Hornsent lore at all.
Yeah,
So
they
I
don't
think
seem
the
to be
word
very
Empyrean
involved.
in her title was probably just used here to simply convey that the Grandam, with her tangled horns, was divine. Indeed, Zuli the Witch recently revealed that all Hornsent are codenamed Empyrean in the files. And I think that's because, thanks to their horns, they are considered heavenly Empyrean
Right, they
beings.
already have divinity
That's the
in
literal
them because of
definition
it.
the word Empyrean.
Okay.
And I reckon it was changed because they realized people would classify this character as an Empyrean that was
Vessel.
like Rani, or Mikola, or Melania, or Marika, which she wasn't. Those are Empyreans capable of claiming the divinity of the Elden Ring, but in my opinion, there's not much evidence that the Hornsent were seeking the divinity of the Elden Ring at all.
They
To
wanted a
argue for
direct
that last point,
divinity
I'm going to try and argue
to
that
them.
the Divine Gate accesses a power that is separate to the Elden Ring, and that it is a power that precedes the Elden Ring.
It's a greater
if
will.
anything. As Mikola journeys through the realm of shadow, he divests himself of his strength, and his great rune of the Elden Ring as well. His power of enchantment is thus broken. And yet, when he returns from beyond the Divine Gateway in Divine Aspect, he commands that power once more, with a new power to spark a new age centered on his circlet of light. And this is all without the Elden Ring.
Right.
Just so, it follows that Marika could also have drawn power from the gate in a similar way. In the trailer, she holds threads of light up to the Divine Gate, the same threads that appear when she later shatters the Elden Ring.
Okay.
So maybe she's weaving her order of the Elden Ring into being here, using the divine energies of the gate. It's clear that the Elden Ring represents a type of order for the world. It's a blueprint for life, with its runes that infuse
each Empyrean
nearly
who
everything.
does
And
access
the
godhood
Erdtree,
can
which
weave their own
has the Elden
order?
Ring as its source, only came to represent Marika and her order after her ascent as a god. So you'd think she must have needed the Divine Gate for something. I think she needed it to access the divine energies of the Crucible. For, according to the Gilded Great Shield, the Crucible's primordial matter became the Erdtree. And I think
So the Erdtree wasn't
that's
strong
what we're
enough
seeing happen
itself. She had to go directly
One
to
counterpoint
the
to this
source.
theory is that Placidusax, who was Elden Lord in an age before Marika, would not have had access to this divine gate.
He wouldn't have
And
needed
yet,
it.
their Elden Ring still commanded an age. But that doesn't mean that Placidusax and his god didn't have a divine gateway of their own, tapping into these crucible energies that apparently are
So there could be
important for
multiple
gods to
gateways.
command an age. Farum Azula features interred remains all throughout its structures.
Just
and
like the Hornsent.
We've established that having conglomeration of sacrificed flesh can lead to the construction of a divine gateway. There are beastmen in the Farum Azula pillars. There are dragons in its earth. And Placidusax's mausoleum especially evokes the idea of a divine gateway. A sacred place built with corpses within a spiraling storm by an Elden Lord with spiraling necks.
it could be as close
a
as
race
possible
of dragons
to
that definitely
the divine.
evoke aspects of the Crucible in more ways than one. But as we know, Placidusax's god, who was assumedly the vessel of the Elden Ring, would flee, hinting at an event that could have led to the Elden Ring passing into human hands via the Fingers, who did have a hand in the dragon's age and who did play a part in the birth of the Erdtree to come as well.
They wanted
This is getting a little off topic,
Golden
and
Order.
I'll admit there's more speculation here than I'd like, so I will revisit these theories in future videos, especially if you guys have feedback for them in the comments. I want this to make sense as much as possible. But to recap, I believe that divine gates are a pure incarnation of the Crucible and its energies. I believe the dragons might have tapped into these energies with their ancient Elden Ring. I think Marika inherited that Elden Ring and similarly used a divine gateway to channel the energies
And
that
enhance her
became the
powers.
Erd Tree. And I think Mikola later tapped into these same crucible energies to start his own age without the Elden Ring.
Yeah.
To be clear, again, this is just one of many ways this whole topic could be interpreted, but
Interesting.
that's how I interpret it for now.
Divine Gate is
As for what
very
lies beyond
fascinating.
the Divine Gateway, that's a fascinating question.
Hey!
I have some ideas, but
That's
perhaps
so
they're better
confusing.
suited for
that
upcoming videos on
they
Marika
can each
or
use it
Mikola,
in different
both
ways.
of whom are the only characters we know of who might have encountered what lies beyond. Though I think there is one other who saw the heart of the Crucible, a Hornsent who beheld the truth, only to see it and weep endlessly.
Chapter 3, Hornsent Lament.
To the Hornsent, horns are a medium for invoking divinity. They're a symbol of spirituality, a sign of prestige, and more. These things all sound very positive, but consider the Lamenter, who is covered in a severe tangling of horns, and yet his face is twisted into an expression of rapturous grief. Tangled horns are caused by horns growing out from other horns at random angles. This is physiologically a very dangerous thing, and indeed most young, bearing the oversized horns, meet a frightfully early
That
demise.
shocked me. I can't
Those
believe
that survive
that.
often
That's
have
really
the inherent
sad.
spirituality to become divine beings,
Yeah,
like the
so
tutelary deities. But
it's a
there's something that
double-edged
sets
sword.
apart the Lamenter, even from them. It's that the Lamenter's horns have tangled towards his own eyes, which they pierce deeply. This is something that also occurred with Moog, whose tangled horns have led him to being blind in one eye.
Yeah.
And there's a trend with blindness that I've been noticing
Allows them to see
recently.
further.
The trend is that blindness appears to be a catalyst for a different kind of sight.
Yes,
One
a
that
different kind of
allows the
sight.
blind to see a higher truth. According to some historians,
Whether
in
it's
real
frenzied
life,
flame.
blindness has long been associated with spiritual powers in Japan. And Elden Ring has this
In other
theme
cultures
all
too,
throughout.
it's true.
The scholars of Raya Lucaria, for example, did not see with their own eyes, and often went mad from seeing the truth in the cosmos. And then there's all the blind who would have made contact with the outer entities, like the Thorn Sorcerers, who discovered the Blood Star in their eternal darkness. Hieta saw frenzy that couldn't be seen with the naked eye, and Moog made contact with the formless mother. Now, I've seen some theories online that claim the Lamenter is similarly blessed by a bunch of outer gods. So let's go over those theories and see how valid they are, starting with the least valid, in my opinion. Some say the Lamenter wields black flame, making them tied to destined death or an outer god of death, but I disagree with that one. The darkness the Lamenter wields is actually not black flame, but rather it's a more literal darkness effect that was introduced in the DLC, and we also see it being cast by the Curse Blades. The Curse Blades, like the Lamenter, were imprisoned in a devastatingly dark jail, so I'd argue that their proficiency
wield
in these
literal
dark
darkness.
arts came about from that imprisonment, rather than anything else. Next, some say the Lamenter is inhabited by the fell god of flame, citing its tufts of red hair and the face growing out of its back. And I think this theory has a bit more heft to it, although you can argue against it just as well. Yes, the fire giants do have a face growing on them, like the Lamenter, but theirs is one-eyed, and the fell god is famously depicted as a one-eyed god, though you can counter that counter-argument with the fact that the visage of the fell god depicted by the furnace golem does have two eyes. So I think it's hard to argue whether the fell god is one-eyed or if that's just the way the fire giants experienced it. As for the Lamenter's red hair, it could be tied to the fell god, since the fire giants had red hair. But you could also argue that the Lamenter's red hair is a sign of its connection to the Crucible instead, many connected to the Crucible sport red hair,
Okay.
like the Leonine Misbegotten or the giant red bears, and one could also argue that Radigan resented his red hair for this reason. So I'm hesitant to say that the Lamenter's red hair definitely connects it to the Fell God.
Yeah.
But my favorite idea for the Lamenter places it as adjacent to the outer god of frenzy, who is represented by those themes of orange flame and, notably, of lament. It's pretty subtle, but there's actually an orange hue emitted by the eyes of the lamenting visage, in its icon at least. That said, it doesn't cause frenzy, so I don't think the Lamenter is aligned with the outer god of frenzy per se. Rather, I think the Lamenter simply has some overlap with frenzy and its grief, while also being equal parts rapturous and blissful as well. So, to start,
So
let's go over
access to
the most
multiple outer
important
gods.
paragraph of lore that is related to this creature, and it's from the Lamenter's Mask. It reads, "This transformation tallies with the state of a denizen of paradise, but the people of the tower denied and hid it from the world. In their foolishness, they viewed true bliss with deep fear." Earlier, we established that the Lamenter's lack of sight is paradoxically a theme of enlightenment that is common to other blind characters in the game. Thus, I think it's fair to consider the Lamenter an enlightened character, experiencing a state of bliss as a result. And I think this enlightenment is also why the Lamenter's state of true bliss is one that should have been studied by the Hornsent, not shunned.
So they locked him away.
After all, the goal of Hornsent ascetics to ascend to a higher state of divinity, and the Lamenter's transformation tallies with the state of a denizen of paradise.
Then why would they have locked him away?
And yet, in the case of the Lamenter, the people of the tower denied and hid it from the world. Why? Probably because the Lamenter terrified them. Imagine you cultivate this enlightened being with intensely tangled horns, representing this paragon of divinity on earth.
Yeah,
and
shouldn't
what
they
does
be
it do?
so in awe of him?
Laments unstoppably. And the lore says that they were terrified of its condition, specifically its state of true bliss and rapturous grief. That's why they hid it away. We know the Hornsent were prideful to a fault, so of course they denied the Lamenter's true bliss. To accept it would be to accept that the path to divinity could lead to this pathetic, mournful creature, and so they sectioned off the Lamenter from the world and entombed it in darkness.
I feel like that's such an odd
This is very
reason.
similar to what the Hornsent did with Midra, whose lore you can find fully explained in this video. In that video, I talk at length about the Inquisitors, aged, powerful torturers who were tasked with
but don't they,
basically
exactly. Don't they love
stifling any
torture?
threats to the
And
Hornsent
lamentation
that would have
be
arisen
part of
from
that.
within their own culture. These were some of the highest ranked members of Hornsent society. Indeed, they were the ones who would receive golden horn tenders, spiral horns coated with gold that were greater even than the silver horn tenders, which were themselves symbolic of society's upper echelons. I suspect
still
the
very
Inquisitors
confused why they
would
would
have
have
been involved
denied
with the Lamenter's imprisonment
Lamenters.
as well. For the Lamenter held a truth that was dangerous to the religious core of Hornsent society. But they should have accepted it. The lore says
That's
that
what I think.
in their foolishness, the Hornsent viewed true bliss with deep fear, which logically means that it would have been the opposite of foolishness to accept it. It would have been wise to accept it.
Yeah,
But what
and
did the
beneficial.
Lamenter see? What did they experience? Well, that's the big question, isn't it?
Yeah.
Personally,
I'm quite
I
surprised
think
they didn't
the Horned
accept him.
Lamenter beheld the truth behind the Crucible. I believe that it realized that life is ultimately an awful crucible of competition, with all of the suffering and power and struggle and evolution that entails. But what it saw can't be all bad, right? The Lamenter is weeping, yes, but it's also, paradoxically, in a state of rapturous true bliss. It's happy on some level, not unlike the so-called evil spirits that the Omen saw, perhaps, which were also smiling. The lamenting visage also has an unusual expression that somehow imparts a sense of contentment. It is the languid ease of one who needs not sight. To those who seek happiness, blindness is bliss. There's probably a few ways to interpret this, but I personally interpret it to mean that the horrifying truth of the world can be safely ignored. Indeed, Mikola does return from the divine gate with his eyes wide shut, and we never see Marika's eyes either. The Lamenter thus offers
Maybe blindness
salvation,
is
but the
an
Hornsent
essential
could
part
not
of
accept
godliness.
or would not accept. So, circling back to the idea that the Lamenter is adjacent to the outer god of frenzy, I have one last theory, and it's that many outer gods, Rot, the mother of truth, death, they all erupt after being suppressed, but can flourish when they're being accepted, as we've seen with the Rot in the DLC. We talked about this at length in the previous video on Raw, and how that was a balanced society which accepted outer gods like the one of Rot. So, what if this is the Lamenter simply accepting the terrible truths related to frenzy? The Lamenter could therefore represent the idea that lamentation is healthy, but suppression of those who saw the truth, like Midra, is not. I don't know for sure. This is my interpretation of this character. But I think, what FromSoftware are really trying to say is you should watch my Prepare to Cry.
Hey!
Let it all out.
Beautiful. Chapter 4, Ascent. That's so fascinating, but because they were doing all the jarring, I would have thought that their goal would be someone like the
There's evidence that the Hornsent
Lamentation
accepted her
guy.
and the Elden Ring. For one, there are multiple Hornsent references to Marika's purge as a betrayal, and for the Hornsent to consider her actions a betrayal, she must have been aligned with them in the first place. Though, as additional evidence of her rule reaching the Hornsent, the rune arcs of the Elden Ring are enshrined in Anir Elim. Stakes of Marika are found throughout Midra's Manse, which was cut off from the rest of the Realm of Shadow early on. The Great Sword of Damnation references her Golden Order, and the Dueling Shield makes it clear that ritual combat to honor the Erd Tree was a cultural practice of the Realm of Shadow.
Right.
What's more, there's evidence that Messmer's Crusade did not happen immediately after Marika's ascent to power. In fact, there's evidence it happened much later. As per a conversation I had recently with Dave Control, another lore creator, we know this because A. R'Lana, sister of Renala, joined Messmer's crusade with Renala's blessing, meaning Renala must have been aligned with Radagon at the time, and B. Messmer knows what a tarnished is, meaning his crusade likely happened after Godfrey became tarnished. But slowly, as order was established, the Crucible would be looked back upon with scorn for its close resemblance to chaos. This paradigm shift would have helped to justify the veil being
so Crucible was also seen as bad by the Golden Order sometimes.
To justify the Hornsent being crucified. I think this might have also been the moment when the shadow of the Erd Tree came into being. We learn from the remembrance of the Shadow Sunflower that the Shadow Tree is born of dark notions that bear no sense of order, that twist and bend its stalk, rendering it brittle. And there's that word twist again. A second stalk winds tightly around the first, almost as if in a tender embrace. The Shadow Tree itself is a spiral, so it makes sense that it evokes the Crucible, which also seems to bear no sense of order. I think it's the shadow of the Erd Tree that was left behind as the Purge began. We'll go over the events of the Purge in more detail in the next lore video, which will likely be on Messmer, so please subscribe for that. But let me briefly sum up the Purge here, as it relates to the Hornsent, at least. For the Hornsent fought back, with the sculpted keepers especially, who were able to put the violent ritual of the lion dance towards martial ends. However, most keepers were gored, hung and burned upon Messmer's spears, and those who witnessed the deed likened it to a funeral pyre for the tower itself. The Curseblades fought in this war as well, wielding the Hornsent's signature backhand blades to fend off the invaders.
Okay.
They were a scourge that failed to become tutelary deities, and they were largely imprisoned by the Hornsent.
Wow.
So many must have been released when the invasion began,
Being like,
because
please
they
help
also
us.
became a scourge for those who invaded the Hornsent homeland.
Wow.
Despite their efforts, we get the impression the purge was very one-sided. Though, once conquered, the Hornsent weren't entirely wiped out. They were permitted to remain in their ruined cities. Many were sealed away safely in shadow, and records of their culture were even archived in a specimen storehouse, with Hornsent themselves maintaining the records. At some point, it seems Messmer's army no longer had the will to carry out the rest of the Crusade. Or maybe
Because he
they
felt
simply didn't
abandoned
have a
by
reason
Marika
to.
and resentful.
Indeed, I think it rather plain to see. Things once broken can never be the same.
This is our nameless Hornsent, refusing to wax nostalgic about days gone by after being handed a scorpion stew, which is a potent reminder of his past. Like him, his people persist, and yet they're lost.
They have nowhere to go.
If Miquella's redemption soothes the ache that throbs within, demanding blessed vengeance, then I wish not to be by him redeemed.
Hornsent's fate is to lose himself to the cycle of vengeance,
Yeah.
even after it is achieved. This is why Miquella
It
wished
wasn't
to
enough.
die for the sins of the past and be reborn, and Hornsent shows us why Miquella's charms are necessary if an age of compassion is to be achieved.
Oh,
Thank you for
forgiveness
watching.
has to happen for
In
all.
case you missed the ad read earlier, please
see.
go and check out Path of Exile 2 while it's in early access. It was a privilege to be sponsored by a game I really, really enjoy. Be good to one another, and I'll see you next time.
You can kill her.
A curse upon thee, rotten miscreant. A curse
miscreant?
upon the strumpet's progeny. Upon Marika's children, each and all. The curse of the omen shall strike thee down in the form of the sacred beasts I
Ooh. Wow. Okay, that was a lot more speculative than I anticipated. There's a lot of unknowns of what their ultimate goal was. Like the Hornsent, they're so radically religious and spiritual, and they are obsessed with their practices, but they also completely conflict with their own beliefs. I mean, all the crazy things they were doing to try and make this melding of the shamans with other Hornsent and things that they say would lead to sainthood, they think that's a really good thing. And then they get a kind of culmination of their holiness through the lamenting guy, I'm so sorry, I forget his name, and they abandon that and shun it and say that that's not the truth. And I mean, I know that's not too dissimilar to aspects of modern religion in our world, but it's just so fascinating that they seem to almost not want to achieve this enlightenment or this answer. They like the process of waiting for this sign or this greater purpose, but they don't want to actually achieve it. At least that's what I'm getting from how they're reacting to any changes that come their way. They're kind of resisting it and doubling down on their practices, as opposed to, you know, taking on this change as, this is what we had been invoking and praying for and causing, so this must be the change that we should do. So it is, I guess, in line with their kind of pridefulness that was explained, that they are very, I guess, not willing to allow any change, even if it's for their own religious benefit. I mean, it even said, like, it was foolish of them to not accept the lamenting guy, sorry, forgetting his name, because that might have been what they were praying for and trying to invoke this entire time, and then they're just like, nah, not you. So that's very fascinating. And surprisingly, it wasn't discussed much how Hornsent and Omen and Fellomen like beings were seen as disgraced in the lands between, but in the land of the shadow of the Erd Tree, it's praised. It's seen as a holiness, as a blessing. Like if you're born with all of these twisting horns, you are more holy, more enlightened, more, worthy. But the reality is the direct opposite for in the lands between. They are shunned. They are seen as disgraced by Golden Order, as but they follow Golden Order so much, but without necessarily the order, more just the directly through the crucible. So I guess it's just like two versions of a religion, I guess, but they completely don't overlap in these specific aspects. So I guess there's different denominations of religions, whether it's Christianity, Islam, like Hinduism, like there's a whole bunch of different denominations. So I guess that's what I'm trying to work out, is if this is a separate denomination to the rest of the Golden Order, because there are Crucible Knights, I think, in the regular Golden Order. But if Crucible is seen as a bad thing, like a thing of chaos and like devolution and stuff like that, then I'm a little bit confused there. So yeah, but otherwise that is super fascinating and really, really cool and creepy. Like they are their own detriment, the Hornsent. They really force and are such a brutal, extreme people that even if they get what they're trying to achieve, they'll still go against it because they're just so headstrong into their practices and doing things the way they've always known it to be holy and right and righteous. So yeah, to the point that they'll ignore any sense of doubt when they're doing horrific things to the shamans and their own Hornsent people who have sinned or gone against their ways. They can be very apathetic to their own kind. So that's intense. They're probably one of the most religious, extreme group of the world, of the lands between and the Shadow of the Erd Tree, the land of shadow. So yeah. All right. Let me know what you think and what you gathered from all that. And if you think I'm way off base, please let me know. I do love to read your comments, letting me know these things as well. It's really, really exciting for me to learn. So thank you so, so much. And let me know what you'd like me to react to next, what you think. I absolutely mustn't miss to understand the world the best I can. And thank you so, so much for supporting this channel. I really appreciate it. And I will see you in the next video. Bye.